At Nostalgic Air Parts, we get a lot of questions about Sanden clutch assemblies. Today I would like to speak with you about the 508 and the 709 Sanden style compressor. I'm going to explain how to remove the clutch assembly, how the assembly works, and how to reinstall it. To begin, you need a 3/4 inch socket to remove the nut off the compressor shaft on a 508 compressor. If you have a 709 compressor, you need a 14mm socket. To remove the hub off the compressor, you'll need 2 flat blade screwdrivers. You take your flat blade screwdriver and set it under the rivet on the hub and on the shaft of the compressor. Put your hand over the blade of the screwdriver and tap. Take your 2 blades and stick it between the pulley and the hub to get the hub off. A 709 is a little different. You stick the screwdriver between the 2 parts of the hub and pry up. If it doesn't come off easy, don't force it. These hubs sometimes require a hub puller. You have threads in the hub where you put the hub puller. Next step is to remove the snap ring that holds on the pulley. On the 709 and the 508, the rest of these steps are the same. So I'm just going to demonstrate with the 709. You remove your snap ring from the pulley with your snap ring pliers. You're going to need a pulley puller, something similar to this, to remove the pulley off the compressor. You can use a 3-claw or a 2-claw pulley puller, it doesn't matter. I recommend putting the nut back on your threads of your compressor so you don't lose your shims or damage the threads on the shaft. Simply pull off your pulley. With the pulley off, now we're going to remove the coil. You have another snap ring holding the coil on. There's a Phillips head screw here holding the wire for the coil. You also have to loosen that. This is your coil. This is your pulley, which has a bearing inside, and this is your hub. Those are your 4 parts of a clutch assembly. How they work is simple. Your pulley has a belt, your coil is a magnet, and your hub goes on top of the pulley to turn the compressor shaft. When this coil gets power, it magnetizes this hub onto the surface of the pulley. When the belt's turning the pulley and this pulls down onto it, that in turn turns the shaft of the compressor to make it pump. I'm going to demonstrate how you get power on a coil and how the magnet works. I'm using a power inverter to do this. When I give this coil power, it's going to engage the magnet. 1 second. Having a little trouble. As you can see, it's a magnet. You ready? That's all a coil does. A coil is simply a magnet. The only thing the hub does is turn the shaft of the compressor. The only thing a pulley does is provide the power to turn the shaft of the compressor when the coil is engaged. There's a bearing inside here. Bearing looks like this. The reason a clutch will burn up is because of heat. When a compressor runs low on lubricant, it'll cause heat out the nose of the compressor. This heat then transfers to your bearing, which melts your liquid inside this bearing. When that happens, your bearing goes bad or gets noisy. If it gets too hot, it'll melt the epoxy that holds your coil wires in. Normally, if a clutch goes bad, something caused it within the compressor or the rest of the system. Clutches don't go bad by themselves. The only thing that can happen on a clutch to make it go bad is what's called the air gap. Between this hub and this pulley, that small space is called the air gap. On a Sanden compressor, your air gap needs to be 16 thousandths to 31 thousandths of an inch. If that gets larger than that, the coil won't have the power to pull this down. So if this is happening on your vehicle, what you do is you take a screwdriver and tap it, and the compressor will start spinning. That's how you can tell if the air gap's bad. I'm going to show you how to set the air gap in a few minutes. To reassemble your compressor and coil, you have a dowel on the coil. You simply match the dowel up with the compressor. When your dowels are matched up, put your snap ring back on. You may want to tap your snap ring down to make sure they're in place. It doesn't hurt. If they're not, that coil will spin. It'll rip your wire off. It'll give you a headache. Once you have that on, go ahead and tighten your wire on the coil. To put the pulley on, I don't know why I took that off. I didn't mean to. To put the pulley on, you set it on top and you press down. Now you're not going to be able to press it. What you could do is get a socket large enough to fit on the outside of that race of the bearing and tap it. Tap it gently. Don't knock it hard and mess up your bearing. I recommend using an arbor press. Flip your compressor upside down, center your press on the back of the compressor, and press it on. Once that's on, put your hub on. Earlier I mentioned shims for the air gap. The shims are very small. They look like little washers. On a 508, the shim's larger. It actually goes over the keyway. To change the shims on a 508, sometimes you have to remove the keyway and put it back in. To put your hub on a 709, you simply push it on most of the time. This one went on without a problem. I'm going to tighten this bolt, then I'm going to show you a 508 because they're a little bit different. You know what? I forgot to put our snap ring back on for the pulley. So let me do that first and then I'll show you the rest. I'm bound to make a mistake. There's no takes on this. This is a one-shot deal, so bear with me. I'm sorry about that. So now we got our snap ring on. I'm glad I missed that step. It's very important. If I wouldn't have done that, this pulley would walk off and you'd have all kinds of noise that would really cause you a headache. So pay attention when you're putting it back together and don't make the same mistake I just did. So you push and put your hub down onto your pulley and you tighten this. Now on that, I didn't torque it properly, but I'll take this back apart after the video. You want to torque the M8 thread, the M8 nut on this thread at 11 to 14 foot-pounds. On a 508, you torque it down to 20 to 25 foot-pounds. On a 508 compressor, you want to line your hub up with the keyway and you set it on. It won't go down. What you could do is take a socket and set it on the inside of the hub and tap it. If that doesn't work, you can put it in your arbor press and just simply press it on. To check the air gap, what you want to do is you want to put your nut on and tighten the nut onto the hub. Once you have that done, you grab your feeler gauges and you stick it between your hub and your pulley. I'm at 0.18. I may need a smaller feeler gauge. If it's less than 16, I'm going to want to put a shim on it and respace it. As you can see, it just goes in there for demonstrative purposes only. If this was going on a car, you'd want to do it correct. I'm just showing how it's done. Now that the whole system's back together, if you wanted to test your coil, make sure everything's working properly, you can grab your power, plug it up to your coil wire. I'm going to get this close so we can hear it. You won't be able to see it. That's how we know our coil's working properly. So this compressor is ready to bolt back on the vehicle. At this time, I've explained how it all works. If you have any further questions, please feel free to email or call us at any time. And thank you for watching our video.